D minor piano concerto has these great Beethoven elements in it. The opening sounds like a part out of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony from the first movement. The third movement sounds like a Beethoven piano concerto. But at the same time, it's essentially Brahms. You see the composer, Brahms, starting to really develop a maturity of his craft.
When the piano enters the concerto for the first time, the orchestra has already played for 5 minutes. And it's a very unique entrance for a pianist. Usually, the first time you hear a piano entrance, it's very loud and bombastic with the opening theme. The orchestra at this point has already stated all the themes. They've set the scene, and the piano comes in rather quietly. And it reminds me a little bit of a new baby who's born into a family that has lots of kids, and the parents are running around, and the little baby sneaks in, a little unknown. If you're hearing the Brahms concerto for the first time, the important thing is to try and allow the rest of the world just to disappear for a little while and go into the world of Brahms. He really was aware of the sound that he was trying to create. So if it's possible when you come to this concert to just allow the rest of the world and the worries of the day disappear and become a member of Brahms's sound for a little while, I think you will really have a great time. Not only does this piece cover so many different emotions, even within little phrases, he'll go from one emotion and end in another. But he also has a lot of action verbs that happen throughout this piece. So there's a lot of running, there's a lot of plodding, there's a lot of flying. And at the end of the second movement, as I was practicing this weekend, I started to feel like I was flying, and I noticed that my hands actually looked like they were butterflies flying across the keyboard. Brahms was the first person to perform the concerto in 1858. 3 years later, his very good friend Clara Schumann had the opportunity to play the piano concerto, and Brahms was conducting. And after the performance, they were all complimenting her and saying how much the audience loved the performance. And she said, I honestly can tell you, I had the best time of anybody at this performance. She really enjoyed playing this piece. So please join us for this performance and try to compete with me to see who enjoys the piece more.
Stravinsky's Rite of Spring is essentially the birth of contemporary music. Pierre Boulez said that when we talk about contemporary music, it's all made possible because of this one performance in 1913 that people in Paris were not expecting. This kind of upstart ballet company called the Ballet Russe by a failed musician turned impresario, Serge Diaghilev, who brought together all the greatest artists, painters, musicians, dancers of the so-called luminous years in Paris, and Stravinsky happened to be one of them. Nobody musically had really come along quite yet, aside maybe from Debussy to some degree, coloristically, who would make the splash that Paris was waiting for and the world was waiting for in 1913. Once that first bassoon solo sounded, which was supposed to be this kind of primitive pipe, nobody expected the audience reaction. Essentially, people started booing, people started jeering. The jeers and the boos got so loud that the orchestra couldn't even hear themselves. The dancers couldn't even hear the orchestra. People were yelling for doctors, people were yelling for dentists because they got their teeth knocked out, and it turned into just this all-out brawl. Nobody imagined that you would actually be hauled away in an ambulance leaving this performance. Stravinsky was trying to evoke sounds of pipes and flutes that we think may have existed thousands of years ago. He's trying to bring back these ancient tribal rites that could have only been passed down from generation to generation over multiple millennia. Every time you conduct it, every time you play it or hear it, it just brings up the most primitive instincts and the most primal feelings and sounds. Even in 2018, it sounds incredibly contemporary. It sounds incredibly new. You can imagine in that time the dancers having to try and dance to portray this music, to bring it to life. This is really a celebration of the human experience, of human history, and I also think that you're going to be surprised it was written over 100 years ago. To me, every single performance at the Rite Spring feels like we're doing it all over again, except we do highly discourage the brawls and the fisticuffs.